I spent 6 years grinding myself to dust, proving every metric, staying in the office long after the building went dark. Then, just as I reached for that project director position, they ripped it from my hands without a decent explanation. I bit my tongue and stayed silent. Until the day their pride and joy, their brainchild called Orion X, exploded right in front of the entire company. That wasn't an accident, that was justice. My name is Madeline Ross, Maddie to those who pretend to know me. And at 34, I'd already given Arclight Dynamics the best years of my life. 6 years in this glass tower in downtown Denver, where the mountains mock us through floor-to-ceiling windows, reminding us there's a world beyond spreadsheets and sprint reviews. Arclight Dynamics, just saying the name used to fill me with pride. We were the crown jewel of tech innovation in Colorado. A company that promised to revolutionize how businesses integrate AI into their operations. The lobby gleamed with awards. The break rooms buzzed with TED Talk discussions. And the parking garage housed more Teslas than a dealership. This was where dreams supposedly became algorithms, and algorithms became billions. The reality? It was a pressure cooker designed by sadists with MBAs. Our KPIs weren't just goals, they were blood oaths. Miss your quarterly metrics by 2%. And you'd find your desk mysteriously closer to the bathroom by Monday. Hit them, and you earned the privilege of even more impossible targets. The unspoken rule was simple. Your life belonged to Arclight from 7 a.m. to whenever your laptop finally died, usually around midnight. I thrived in it. God help me, I actually thrived. As a strategic analyst, I dissected market trends like a surgeon, finding opportunities where others saw static. My forecasting models had saved the company millions, identifying 3 major market shifts before our competitors even knew to look. I'd built relationships with every department, understanding not just the what, but the why behind every project. While others played politics, I played chess with data. The office culture was distinctly American corporate theater, collaborative on the surface, cutthroat underneath. We had ping-pong tables nobody used, meditation rooms that served as crying chambers, and unlimited PTO that translated to, "We dare you to take it." The real currency wasn't money, it was visibility. Being seen by the C-suite, getting that nod from the board, having your name mentioned in the quarterly all hands, that's what mattered. I believed in the system, genuinely believed that excellence would be recognized, that merit would triumph over networking, that staying until security did their rounds would mean something. Every weekend I sacrificed, every family dinner I missed, every relationship that withered while I nursed another presentation. It was all an investment in a future where my efforts would be rewarded. My desk sat on the 14th floor, Strategic Development Division, with a view of the Rockies that I rarely had time to appreciate. The space was open concept, which meant zero privacy and maximum surveillance. We worked in what they called pods, clusters of desks where collaboration was mandatory and escape impossible. My pod included 2 junior analysts who treated me like a deity and 1 senior analyst who saw me as competition. The morning commute from my Capitol Hill apartment took 35 minutes on good days, an hour when I-25 decided to be difficult. I'd listen to business podcasts, mainline coffee, and rehearse presentations for meetings that might never happen. By the time I badged in each morning, I'd already responded to 20 emails from my phone. This was my world, harsh fluorescent lights that gave everyone a corpse-like pallor, the constant hum of computers that never slept, the smell of burnt coffee and desperation. We measured our days in Slack messages, our weeks in sprint completions, our years in stock vesting schedules. And through it all, I maintained faith that this system, however flawed, would ultimately prove fair. That someone like me, someone who'd memorized every process, exceeded every expectation, bled corporate blue, would eventually claim their rightful place at the table where real decisions were made. What a spectacular fool I was. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, while snow still dusted the Denver streets. Orion X Project Director position, internal applications now open. My heart hammered as I read it 3 times, making sure I wasn't hallucinating from caffeine overdose. This was it, the flagship AI platform that would define ArcLight's next decade, and they needed someone to lead it. I'd been preparing for this moment without knowing it existed. Every late night suddenly had purpose. Every sacrificed weekend was vindication. The position requirements read like my resume: strategic thinking, cross-functional leadership, deep understanding of AI integration, proven track record of delivering complex projects. Check, 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 and check. My direct supervisor, David Caraway, called me into his office that afternoon. David was 45, with silver temples that he claimed were premature but definitely came from a bottle, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He'd been my boss for 3 years, always supportive in public, always taking credit for my work in emails I wasn't copied on. "Maddie, fantastic work on the Morrison account analysis," he said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from his desk, the one deliberately lower than his own. "I assume you saw the Orion X posting." "I did. I'm planning to apply." His smile widened, showing too many teeth. Good, you should. You're definitely one of our stronger candidates." The way he said "one of" felt like swallowing glass. "Between you and me, though, there's serious competition. Vanessa Green from Product is interested." Vanessa Green. Of course. She'd joined ArcLight 2 years ago from a competitor, bringing with her an MBA from Wharton and a reputation for taking credit faster than a payday loan company. Her actual skills were debatable, but her ability to network was Olympic level. I'd seen her at every happy hour, every optional team-building event, laughing at executives' jokes like they were actually funny. "May the best candidate win," I said, keeping my voice neutral. David leaned back, steepling his fingers, his power pose. "I want you to know I'll be supporting you through this process. Your presentation to the selection committee needs to be flawless. This is your moment, Maddie." I spent the next 3 weeks crafting my proposal. Not just crafting, obsessing. I analyzed every aspect of Orion X, identified optimization opportunities that could save millions, developed a risk mitigation framework that would prevent the disasters that had plagued similar projects. My presentation deck was 60 slides of pure strategic gold, each one backed by data so solid it could withstand a nuclear audit. The night before my presentation, I stayed until 3 a.m., running through every possible question, every potential objection. The janitor, Marcus, found me asleep at my desk at 5 a.m. and gently woke me with a coffee from his personal thermos. "Big day?" he asked. I could only nod. The presentation itself was held in the boardroom on the 20th floor, the inner sanctum where careers were made or murdered. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one that cost a month's rent but made me feel invincible. The selection committee sat before me, 5 executives including the CTO, the chief of staff, and David, who gave me an encouraging nod that felt like a knife between my ribs. I killed it. There's no other way to describe it. Every slide landed perfectly. Every question was answered with precision and confidence. When I demonstrated how my strategic framework could accelerate Orion X's deployment by 3 months while reducing costs by 20%, I saw the CTO's eyebrows rise, the highest praise he was capable of showing. Vanessa presented after me. I watched from the observation room as she stumbled through technical specifications, clearly reading from notes someone else had written. Her cost projections were off by millions. Her timeline unrealistic, her risk assessment non-existent. She compensated with charm and buzzwords. But surely they could see through it. Surely merit mattered here. The final decision would be announced Friday afternoon at the all-hands meeting. Those 3 days stretched like years. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely focus on my regular work. David kept giving me knowing looks, little thumbs up when passing my desk. "Looking good," he'd whisper. Friday arrived gray and sleeting. The all-hands was held in the main auditorium. 300 employees gathered to hear quarterly results and exciting organizational updates. I sat in the 3rd row. My hands clenched so tight my nails left crescents in my palms. The CEO took the stage, working through the agenda with corporate efficiency, revenue up, expansion on track, new partnerships secured, then, and now, David Caraway will announce our new Orion X project director. David walked to the podium with that same predator's smile. He talked about the importance of the role, the careful consideration given to all candidates. The selection was extremely difficult, he said, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. But ultimately, we've selected someone who embodies the collaborative spirit and relationship-building skills essential for this role. Please join me in congratulating Vanessa Green. The applause sounded like static. I sat frozen while Vanessa walked to the stage, hugging David like they were old friends. Which, I realized with crystalline clarity, they probably were. I don't remember leaving the auditorium. One moment I was sitting in that chair, watching Vanessa accept my future. And the next, I was in the parking garage, sitting in my car with the engine off, staring at nothing. The sleet hammered against the windshield, each impact like a tiny accusation. 6 years. 6 fucking years of my life. And for what? The weekend passed in a blur of wine and self-pity. I didn't answer texts, didn't check emails, didn't even look at my laptop. My apartment felt like a tomb. Every certificate on the wall, every company award on my shelf mocked me. Saturday night. I found myself on the bathroom floor, drunk enough to be honest with myself. This wasn't just about a promotion. This was about believing in a lie so completely that I'd built my entire identity around it. Sunday evening, my phone finally rang enough times that I had to answer. It was Rachel, my best friend since college, now a junior partner at a downtown law firm. Maddie, I heard, Sarah from your company told me at yoga. I'm coming over. She arrived with Thai food and bourbon, the good stuff. Not the rot gut I'd been poisoning myself with. Rachel was everything I wasn't. Ruthless, practical, unencumbered by illusions about corporate loyalty. She let me rant for an hour, then held up her hand. Okay, stop. Just stop. She poured us both another drink. You know what your problem is. You think this is a meritocracy. You think being good at your job matters. But Maddie, honey, being good at your job is like the minimum buy-in at a poker table. The real game? That's about who you know, who you blow, and who owes you favors. So what am I supposed to do? Become like them? Rachel studied me over her glass. No. But you need to stop being their victim. They played dirty and won. You can either leave with your tail between your legs, or you can stay and make them regret it. I can't just sabotage. I'm not talking about sabotage. I'm talking about letting them fail on their own. Because we both know Vanessa's going to fuck this up. The question is, are you going to warn them when she does? Monday morning arrived like a hangover. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, debating whether to go in or drive to the mountains and never come back. But Rachel was right about one thing. Leaving now would be admitting defeat. They'd won this battle unfairly. But maybe the war wasn't over. I walked into the office with my head high, ignoring the sympathetic looks and whispered conversations that stopped when I passed. My desk was exactly as I'd left it, except for a small card from David. Your contributions to the selection process were invaluable. Looking forward to your continued excellence. I threw it in the trash without reading it twice. The first team meeting after the announcement was torture. Vanessa stood at the front of the conference room, outlining her vision for Orion X, which sounded suspiciously like bullet points from my presentation, dumbed down and sprinkled with corporate jargon. David sat beside her, nodding along like a proud parent. I want this to be a collaborative effort, Vanessa said, her voice syrupy with false modesty. We're all in this together. Maddie, I'm especially hoping to leverage your analytical expertise for the implementation phase. Leverage my expertise. She wanted me to do her job while she took the credit, again. Of course, I heard myself say. Happy to support the team. David beamed. That's the spirit we need. Maddie's a team player, always has been. Team player, code for doormat. That night, I met Rachel for drinks at a dive bar where no one from ArcLight would ever go. I can't do it, I said. I can't pretend everything's fine. I can't help her succeed with my project. Rachel signaled for another round. Then don't help her succeed. Do your job, exactly as instructed. Nothing more. Don't go above and beyond. Don't save her from her mistakes. Just exist. That's not who I am. No. But who you are got you fucked over. Maybe it's time to be someone else. She leaned forward, her lawyer face on. Listen, in my world, when someone screws you over, you don't get mad. You get even. But you do it smart. You do it legal. You do it in a way that no one can trace back to you. You're talking about revenge. I'm talking about justice. There's a difference. I stared into my whiskey, seeing my distorted reflection in the amber liquid. The woman looking back at me wasn't the eager analyst who'd walked into ArcLight 6 years ago. She was someone harder, someone who'd learned that playing by the rules only mattered if everyone else was playing the same game. If they want to play dirty, Rachel continued, then at least stop playing clean. You don't have to become them, but you sure as hell don't have to keep being their victim. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Rachel's words echoing in my mind. I thought about David's fake smile, Vanessa's stolen presentation, the 3 days of hope before they crushed it. I thought about Marcus the janitor, the only person who'd shown me genuine kindness. I thought about my parents, who still bragged about their daughter, the executive, to their friends, not knowing I'd just been passed over for someone who couldn't even spell algorithm correctly in her emails. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't quit, I wouldn't sabotage, but I also wouldn't save them from themselves. If Vanessa and David wanted to run Orion X into the ground, who was I to stop them? Let them fall. And when they did, I'd be there to watch. The transformation of ArcLight Dynamics into Vanessa's personal PR machine began immediately. Within a week, her face was plastered across our internal newsletter, standing confidently beside a holographic projection of the Orion X logo. Leading the future of AI integration, the headline proclaimed, as if she'd invented artificial intelligence herself. The all-hands meetings became monthly celebrations of Orion X's theoretical greatness. Vanessa would stride across the stage in her designer suits, throwing around terms like synergistic deployment and revolutionary paradigm shifts, while the executives nodded like bobbleheads. David stood in the wings, his expression that of a proud puppeteer watching his creation dance. We're not just building a platform, Vanessa announced at April's gathering, her voice echoing through the auditorium. We're architecting the future of how businesses think. The applause was thunderous. I clapped 2, 3 times, just enough to avoid notice. The media caught wind of Orion X by May. TechCrunch ran a puff piece. ArcLight Dynamics' revolutionary AI platform set to disrupt enterprise management. Vanessa's quote in the article made me physically nauseous. I've been developing this vision for years, waiting for the right moment and the right team to bring it to life. Years. She'd been at the company for 2. Bloomberg followed up with a feature on Women Leading AI Innovation, showcasing Vanessa alongside actual pioneers in the field. She spoke about breaking glass ceilings and the importance of believing in your vision, while I sat at my desk, remembering how she'd asked me just months ago what API stood for. The internal hype machine was even worse. Every floor had new Orion X posters, sleek, minimalist designs featuring abstract neural networks and Vanessa's signature at the bottom. The company newsletter ran weekly updates on the project's astounding progress. Though those of us in strategic development knew the reality, the dev team was in chaos. The timeline was slipping, and the budget had already ballooned by 30%. The flagship event was scheduled for July, a lavish preview for potential clients and investors at the Four Seasons. I received my invitation via internal mail, expensive cardstock with holographic accents. Join us for an exclusive first look at the future. It read, my name was handwritten by someone in PR, but my role was clear, audience member, not participant. David called me into his office the week before the preview. Maddie, I wanted to thank you for being such a good sport about everything, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I know the Orion X decision was difficult, but you've handled it with real professionalism. Just doing my job, I replied, my voice flat as old champagne. That's what I appreciate about you. No drama, no complications. He shuffled some papers on his desk. I want you to know that when Orion X launches successfully, there will be other opportunities. Your patience won't go unrewarded. Patience? As if I was a dog waiting for table scraps. The preview event was everything ArcLight wanted it to be, on the surface. The ballroom sparkled with projection mapping that turned the walls into living circuit boards. Executives from Fortune 500 companies mingled with venture capitalists, all eager to see what Vanessa had promised them. She worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, air-kissing cheeks, making promises she couldn't possibly understand, let alone keep. The beta testing has exceeded all expectations. I heard her tell a group from Wells Fargo, we're seeing efficiency improvements of 300% in our test environments. I knew for a fact that beta testing hadn't even started. The test environment was still crashing every few hours, according to the dev team's Slack channel that they'd forgotten to remove me from. The demonstration itself was smoke and mirrors, a carefully choreographed show using mock-ups and pre-recorded scenarios. The audience gasped at the real-time data processing that was actually a video loop. They applauded the intuitive AI responses that were scripted by a team of writers working 18-hour days. Vanessa stood at the center of it all, glowing in the spotlight like she'd personally coded every line. This is just the beginning, she announced as the demonstration concluded. When Orion X officially launches in September, it will revolutionize how every company in this room operates. We're not just offering a product, we're offering transformation. The room erupted. Standing ovation. I watched from my table in the back, surrounded by other mid-level employees who'd been invited to fill seats. David caught my eye from across the room and raised his champagne glass in what he probably thought was a gesture of inclusion. I raised my water glass in return, imagining it was hemlock. The press coverage the next day was euphoric. ArcLight Dynamics stuns with Orion X preview. The future of enterprise AI has a name. Orion X. Vanessa Green, the visionary behind the next big thing. Our stock price jumped 12%. The board approved an additional $50 million in funding for Orion X. Vanessa was featured on the cover of Denver Business Journal, arms crossed, standing in front of a wall of screens displaying the Orion X interface. The headline, The Architect of Tomorrow. Inside the company, she was untouchable now. She'd moved to a corner office on the executive floor, complete with the assistant and a dedicated PR handler. When she walked through the building, people actually stepped aside. She'd transcended mere mortal employment. She was now corporate royalty. David basked in her reflected glory, taking credit for discovering and nurturing exceptional talent. He was promoted to Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, a title that meant nothing but came with a significant salary bump and his own corner office next to Vanessa's. Meanwhile, I was assigned to supplementary analytics for Orion X, basically doing the grunt work that Vanessa's hand-picked team of sycophants couldn't handle. I ran reports, cleaned data, created projections that I knew were built on foundations of sand. Every spreadsheet I delivered, every analysis I provided. I did exactly as requested. No more, no less. When they asked for numbers, I gave them numbers. When those numbers showed what they wanted to see instead of reality, I didn't correct them. I'd become a ghost in my own career, watching from the shadows as the empire of lies grew taller and more elaborate. But I was a patient ghost. And I was learning that sometimes the best revenge isn't pulling the trigger. It's watching someone else load the gun, point it at their own foot, and declare themselves invincible. September was coming, the real launch. The moment when mock-ups would have to become reality, when promises would have to be kept, when the spotlight would reveal every crack in the facade. I could hardly wait. The first crack appeared in late July, buried in line 847 of a system architecture document that landed on my desk for routine analysis. It was a memory leak in the core processing module, the kind of thing that wouldn't show up in controlled demonstrations but would cause cascading failures under real-world loads. My cursor hovered over the comment button for exactly 3 seconds before I closed the document and marked it as reviewed. By August, the cracks had become chasms. The dev team was working 20-hour days, mainlining Red Bull and desperation in equal measures. I'd catch fragments of panicked conversations by the coffee machine. The authentication protocol is completely fucked. We need at least 3 more months. Has anyone actually tested this with more than 10 concurrent users? The answer to that last question was no. I knew because I'd seen the testing logs that someone had accidentally shared to the wrong Slack channel. Orion X could handle exactly 8 simultaneous connections before it started hemorrhaging data like a severed artery. The revolutionary AI at its core was essentially a chatbot with delusions of grandeur, prone to hallucinations that made it suggest firing entire departments or investing millions in non-existent markets. Vanessa, blissfully unaware of the technical apocalypse brewing beneath her feet, continued her victory lap. She hired a personal brand consultant, started a podcast about leadership in the AI age, and gave a TEDx talk titled Breaking the Binary: How I Revolutionized Enterprise Intelligence. David had it playing on loop in the break room. During a strategy meeting in early August, I watched Vanessa dismiss the lead developer's concerns with a wave of her manicured hand. Tom, you're being too pessimistic. Every major launch has challenges. We just need to maintain velocity and push through. Tom, who looked like he hadn't slept since June, tried again. Vanessa, I'm telling you, the database architecture can't handle. Then make it handle it, she snapped. That's why we pay you the big bucks, right? She turned to David for support, and he nodded sagely. Tom, sometimes we need to embrace a growth mindset, David added, using his favorite meaningless phrase. Let's focus on solutions, not problems. I took detailed notes, as always. Every dismissed warning, every ignored red flag, every moment when ego trumped engineering. Not for any grand plan, just habit at this point. A documentarian of disaster. The real gift came on August 15th, when I was accidentally included on an email chain I definitely shouldn't have seen. Some junior developer had grabbed my address instead of Madeline from marketing. The thread was titled, Urgent, Critical Security Vulnerabilities. The list was staggering. SQL injection vulnerabilities that would make a first-year computer science student cringe. API endpoints with no authentication. Customer data stored in plain text. The entire system was basically a hacker's wet dream, wrapped in a beautiful UI and tied with a bow of corporate ignorance. The thread showed David's response to these concerns. Let's table this until after launch. We can address security in version 2.0. I forwarded the email to my personal account, then deleted it from my work inbox. Not to use it, just to have it. Evidence of the moment when they chose appearance over substance. Deadline over diligence. 3 days later, I discovered something worse. While reviewing integration protocols, I found that Orion X's data sync function had a fatal flaw. Instead of updating records, it was duplicating them. Every sync cycle created ghost entries that compounded exponentially. In testing, with their 10 fake customers, it was invisible, but with thousands of real clients, it would be like a digital cancer, growing until the entire system collapsed under its own bloated weight. I documented my finding in a routine report, using technical language so dense that I knew Vanessa would never read it, and David would pretend to understand it. I buried it on page 47, under a subsection titled Potential Areas for Post-Launch Optimization. They wanted good news, so I gave them good news up front. The catastrophe was there for anyone who cared to look, but they didn't look. Why would they? The press was calling Orion X the deal of the decade. Pre-orders from enterprise clients had exceeded projections by 400%. The board was so confident that they'd scheduled the launch event at the Denver Convention Center, with satellite events in New York, London, and Tokyo. They'd hired Cirque du Soleil performers. They'd commissioned a symphony. Vanessa sent an all-staff email the week before launch. Team, we stand on the precipice of greatness. Each of you has contributed to something that will be remembered as a turning point in corporate history. When your grandchildren ask you what you did that mattered, you'll tell them about Orion X. I read it while eating a sad desk salad, thinking about Tom the developer, who'd submitted his resignation that morning, and 3 QA testers who'd called in sick for the 5th day straight. The rats were fleeing, but the ship's captain was too busy posing for photos to notice. The final pre-launch meeting was held in the boardroom on September 5th. I was there to present routine analytics, watching as Vanessa assured the board that everything was beyond ready. She showed them carefully curated metrics, cherry-picked success stories from beta testing that conveniently omitted the part where they'd reset the entire system 6 times to get those results. "Are there any concerns we should be aware of?" the CEO asked, his tone suggesting he expected the answer to be no. Vanessa's smile never wavered. "None whatsoever. We're about to make history." David nodded enthusiastically. "The team has performed miracles. We're launching ahead of schedule and under budget." The lie was so bold I almost admired it. They were 3 months behind and 40 million over budget. But who was counting? I gave my presentation, 5 minutes of charts showing exactly what they wanted to see. Growth projections that assumed nothing would go wrong. Adoption rates based on fairy tales. ROI calculations built on dreams and wishes. They loved it. As I gathered my materials to leave, the CTO stopped me. "Maddie, you've been remarkably quiet about Orion X lately. Any thoughts?" The room turned to look at me. This was it. My chance to warn them. To be the responsible employee. To save the company from itself. "I think," I said slowly, meeting Vanessa's eyes, "that everyone will get exactly what they deserve." She beamed, taking it as a compliment. David clapped me on the shoulder. The board nodded approvingly. They had no idea how much I meant it. The week before launch, I became a digital phantom with a purpose. Every evening after the office emptied, I'd stay behind, my screen reflecting off the dark windows as I worked. Not to sabotage, never to sabotage, but to ensure that when the inevitable collapse came, the breadcrumbs would be impossible to ignore. I created what I called transparency documentation. Every critical flaw I'd found, I documented in the official project repository, but buried in subsections with mind-numbing titles like auxiliary performance metrics and supplementary integration protocols. The information was there, time-stamped and authenticated, waiting to be discovered when someone eventually asked, "How did no one see this coming?" The genius was in the metadata. Every document showed it had been viewed by David and Vanessa's accounts. They'd opened the files, I could see it in the access logs, but never read past the executive summaries I'd crafted to show exactly what they wanted to see. Their digital fingerprints were all over the evidence of their own negligence. On September 10th, I took a calculated risk. Using an anonymized email account routed through 3 VPNs, I sent a message to the internal audit department, not a warning, that would be too obvious. Instead, I sent them a routine compliance query about data retention policies in the new system, knowing that any competent auditor would spot the security nightmares immediately. The response came back 2 days later. "Thank you for your query. This matter has been forwarded to the appropriate department for review post-launch." The appropriate department was David's team. He'd buried it without a second glance. I saved that email too. 3 days before launch, I discovered Vanessa had been fabricating demo results. She'd hired an external contractor to create a parallel system, a Potemkin village of functionality that looked like Orion X, but was actually a completely different, stable platform. The live demonstrations that had wowed investors, they weren't Orion X at all. The contractor's invoice was right there in the shared finance folder, labeled Marketing Support Services. $50,000 to create a lie. I screenshot everything, storing it on an encrypted drive that never touched the company network. Not for blackmail, not for whistleblowing, just for truth. When the dust settled, someone would need to understand how we got here. The night before launch, I ran one final system diagnostic using my legacy admin access that IT had forgotten to revoke. What I found was worse than even I'd expected. The memory leak had metastasized. The database duplication had created over 3 million ghost entries just in the test environment, The AI was now randomly generating financial projections based on what appeared to be recipes it had scraped from cooking websites. One client's risk assessment included 2 cups of flour as a market factor. I documented it all in a report titled Final Pre-Launch System Review, saved it to the official project folder at 11:47 p.m., and went home. The report was 197 pages long. The executive summary on page 1 said, "All systems operational within expected parameters." The disaster was documented in detail starting on page 15, for anyone who cared to look. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. with a text from Tom, the developer who'd quit. "Saw you're still in the system logs? Whatever you're doing, be careful. These people will burn you to save themselves." I texted back, "I'm not doing anything, just watching the weather. Storm coming. Hurricane season." Launch day, September 15th, arrived with the kind of crisp Denver morning that made the mountains look painted against the sky. I dressed carefully, professional but forgettable, the outfit of someone who'd blend into the background of photos. I wanted to be invisible but present, a witness to what was coming. The convention center was transformed into a temple to corporate ambition. Giant screens showed the Orion X logo morphing through abstract patterns. The press section was packed. The investor seats were full. Employees were grouped by department, wearing matching t-shirts with Orion X, "The Future Starts Now," printed on them. I'd conveniently forgotten mine. Backstage, I caught a glimpse of Vanessa in makeup, having her face powdered while barking orders into her phone. David stood nearby, reviewing his introduction speech on a tablet. Neither of them looked worried. Why would they? They'd constructed such a perfect illusion that they'd fooled even themselves. I found my assigned seat in the middle of the employee section, surrounded by true believers still drunk on company Kool-Aid. The woman next to me, from sales, was literally vibrating with excitement. "This is going to change everything," she whispered to me. "My whole team's commission structure is tied to Orion X sales. We're all going to be rich." I nodded politely, thinking about her mortgage, her kids' college funds, all riding on a platform held together by debugging tape and denial. The lights dimmed. The show was about to begin. David walked onto the stage first, his confidence radiating like uranium, powerful and toxic. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome to Orion X." The crowd erupted. I clapped slowly, methodically, counting down the minutes until reality would assert itself. They wanted to play with fire while standing in a house of cards. I documented where all the matches were, warned them about the gasoline, pointed out the paper walls. But I hadn't lit the match. They'd done that themselves, months ago. With every ignored warning, every dismissed concern, every moment they chose appearance over substance. The demonstration was about to begin. Real time, live, with actual client data. I sat back in my chair and waited for the fireworks. The demonstration began flawlessly because for the first 10 minutes, they were still running the fake system. Vanessa stood at center stage, her voice confident as she walked through the revolutionary features of Orion X. The screens showed perfect data flows, seamless integrations, AI responses that seemed almost prescient. The audience was mesmerized. "Now," Vanessa announced with a theatrical flourish, "let's show you the real power of Orion X. We're going live with actual client data from our beta partners." I watched the lead engineer's face drain of color from his position at the control station. This wasn't supposed to happen. They'd planned to run the parallel system for the entire demo. But Vanessa, drunk on her own hype and the energy of the crowd, had gone off script. The switch happened at 10:47 a.m. For 30 seconds, everything seemed fine. The interface remained responsive, the data appeared to flow. Then, like watching a building collapse in slow motion, the first error message flashed across the main screen, just for a millisecond, but I saw it. Then another. Then another. Vanessa, oblivious, continued her presentation. "As you can see, our AI is now analyzing real-time market data for our partner, Meridian Financial." But the AI wasn't analyzing. It was hallucinating. On the giant screen behind her, Meridian Financial's risk assessment began populating with bizarre recommendations. Invest heavily in extinct butterfly futures. Diversify portfolio with medieval cooking implements. Market volatility suggests increasing exposure to imaginary numbers. A ripple of confusion went through the audience. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Vanessa turned to look at the screen, her smile freezing into a rictus of horror. Just a small display error. David's voice boomed over the sound system as he rushed on stage. Let's switch to our backup demonstration while... But it was too late. The memory leak had reached critical mass. The system wasn't just displaying errors, it was creating them exponentially. Every attempt to access the backup made things worse. The duplication bug I'd found was triggering with each refresh, creating thousands of ghost entries per second. The screens began flickering through client data, real data, unencrypted, completely exposed, social security numbers, credit card information, internal emails, all cascading across the 30-foot displays like a waterfall of liability. Someone in legal actually screamed. "Shut it down!" Vanessa shrieked into her microphone, forgetting it was still live. "Shut it all down!" But you can't just unplug a cloud-based system. The engineers were frantically typing, but every command they entered seemed to make Orion X angrier. The AI had started responding to the chaos by attempting to optimize the situation, which apparently meant sending automated emails to every contact in the system announcing that their companies were bankrupt and suggesting they invest in digital turnips. The press section erupted. Phones came out, cameras started rolling. This wasn't just a failed demo, it was a catastrophe going viral in real time. I watched a reporter from TechCrunch typing furiously, his face lit with the glow of witnessing Silicon Valley history. The CEO rushed on stage, grabbing the microphone from Vanessa's trembling hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain calm while..." The lights went out. Orion X had somehow triggered a power surge that tripped the convention center's main breaker. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a hellish red glow. In that crimson twilight, I could see Vanessa on her knees on the stage, David standing frozen beside her, and 300 people pulling out their phones to document the disaster. It took 45 minutes to restore power. By then, half the audience had left. The other half stayed to watch the carnage like rubberneckers at a highway accident. When the systems came back online, they found that Orion X had, in its death throes, sent approximately 14,000 emails to random recipients, including one to the SEC suggesting that ArcLight Dynamics was laundering money through a fictional banana republic. The final insult came when they tried to do damage control with a simple PowerPoint presentation. Even that failed. Orion X had somehow corrupted every connected system in the building. The PowerPoint opened to a slide that just said, "Help me," repeated 10,000 times in decreasing font sizes. Vanessa fled the stage in tears. David stood at the podium, opening and closing his mouth like a fish drowning in air. The CEO had disappeared entirely, probably already on the phone with legal, PR, and his personal attorney. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within an hour, Orion X's fail was trending globally. The stock market, still open on the East Coast, responded immediately. ArcLight's stock price dropped 40% before trading was halted. Screenshots of the extinct butterfly futures recommendation became instant memes. Someone had caught Vanessa's breakdown on stage and set it to the Titanic theme song. But the real damage was in the data breach. Hundreds of companies' confidential information had been exposed. The lawsuits would start arriving within days, each one another nail in Orion X's coffin. I stayed until the very end, helping other employees pack up the promotional materials that would never be used, the t-shirts that would become ironic Halloween costumes, the banners proclaiming a future that had died before it could begin. As I walked through the convention center's parking garage, I passed Vanessa sitting in her Tesla, still in her presentation outfit, staring at nothing. Her makeup had run in dark streams down her cheeks. She looked like a portrait of ambition's aftermath. David was by the loading dock, chain smoking, something I'd never seen him do before. His hands shook as he brought each cigarette to his lips. When he saw me, he tried to compose himself, to summon that old authority. Maddie, we'll need all hands tomorrow for crisis management. This is just a setback. We can recover from. No, I said, and kept walking. That was the last word I ever spoke to him. Monday morning, I arrived at the office at my usual time. The parking lot was half empty. Many employees had simply not shown up. Those who did moved through the hallways like survivors of a natural disaster, speaking in hushed tones, avoiding eye contact. The Orion X posters had already been removed, leaving ghostly rectangles of brighter paint on the walls. My desk was exactly as I'd left it, but everything else had changed. The energy that once hummed through these floors had flatlined. Arclight Dynamics was now a crime scene, and everyone was either a victim or a suspect. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. By 2 p.m., Vanessa's termination was announced via a terse email. No farewell message, no transition plan. She was simply erased from the company directory as if she'd never existed. Her corner office was already being cleaned out, her personal items boxed and left by security. David lasted until Wednesday. They let him resign, to pursue other opportunities. Corporate speak for, get out before we fire you publicly. I watched from my desk as he carried his single box of belongings to the elevator, his Princeton diploma visible on top. He looked 20 years older than he had the week before. The investigations began immediately. Internal audit, external consultants, federal regulators, they descended like vultures on a carcass. And that's when my documentation became relevant. Every buried report, every ignored warning, every time-stamped proof of negligence was discovered, examined, and added to the growing mountain of evidence. The beautiful irony was that I never had to say a word. The digital trail I'd left was so comprehensive, so meticulously organized, that investigators could reconstruct the entire disaster without my testimony. They found the email chains where David dismissed security concerns. They found the reports where I documented critical flaws. They found Vanessa's contract with the company that built the fake demo system. I resigned on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after the launch. My letter was brief. I am resigning from my position effective immediately to pursue opportunities that better align with my professional values. HR didn't even try to convince me to stay. They processed my exit in record time, eager to shed anyone associated with Orion X. My exit interview was conducted by the new interim CTO, brought in to clean up the mess. He'd clearly read every document I'd created. "You knew," he said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. "You knew this would happen." I documented everything I found, I replied carefully. Every concern was reported through proper channels. He studied me for a long moment. "But you knew they wouldn't listen." "I knew they would make their own choices. I just made sure those choices were well documented." He nodded slowly, understanding passing between us. "For what it's worth, your documentation is the only reason we have any chance of recovering from this. Your reports are being used as evidence that at least someone in the company was doing their job properly." I left Arclight Dynamics at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday, walking out the same doors I'd entered 6 years earlier with such hope and determination. But I wasn't the same person. I was harder, wiser, and finally free. The aftermath continued for months. Arclight's stock never recovered. They lost 60% of their clients. The lawsuits totaled over $200 million. The company survived, barely, as a shadow of its former self. They were eventually acquired by a competitor for a fraction of their former value. Vanessa disappeared from LinkedIn within a week. Last I heard, she was consulting from her parents' house in Connecticut. David tried to resurrect himself as a startup advisor, but the stench of Orion X followed him everywhere. His name had become a verb in tech circles. Don't David this project meant don't ignore obvious problems until they exploded. As for me, I took a month off, sitting on my apartment balcony, watching the mountains change color with the seasons. Rachel helped me update my resume, though I hardly needed it. My reputation as the only person at Arclight who'd actually done their job had preceded me. I had 7 job offers before I'd even started looking. I chose a small AI ethics company, one that valued truth over hype, substance over style. My first day, my new manager said, "We hired you because you're the woman who let Orion X fail rather than enable a lie. That's exactly the integrity we need." Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in the boardroom when the CTO asked for my thoughts. I could have warned them explicitly. I could have been the hero who saved the company from itself. But heroes in corporate America don't get promoted. They get blacklisted for not being team players. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even really a villain. I was just someone who'd learned that in a system built on lies. The most revolutionary act isn't rebellion, it's refusing to participate in the delusion. I did my job, exactly as asked, nothing more. If that was enough to bring down an empire of ego, then perhaps that empire deserved to fall. They canceled my promotion, dismissed my expertise, and stole my work. But in the end, I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to step back and let them destroy themselves. Their flagship project didn't just fail, it imploded so spectacularly that it became a cautionary tale told in business schools. That's not revenge. That's not even karma. That's just what happens when you build your dreams on someone else's nightmares. Eventually, everyone wakes up. The mountains outside Denver still look beautiful in the morning light. I still drink my coffee black. I still arrive at work early and leave late. But now, when I work those long hours, it's for people who value truth over perception, substance over style, integrity over shortcuts. And Vanessa's Architect of Tomorrow headline, it's still accurate, in a way. She did Architect of Tomorrow, one where arc-light dynamics became a synonym for failure, where Orion X became the Titanic of tech launches, where every executive learned to actually read the reports their analysts submit. Some might call what happened cruel. I call it educational. They thought I was just a shadow to be ignored, a cog in their machine. But shadows have a funny thing about them. They only exist when there's light. And when that light turns out to be a fire, you started yourself. Well, shadows are the last thing you need to worry about. That's really corporate karma. Not the instant kind you see in movies, but the slow, inevitable kind that comes from believing your own lies so completely that you forget truth exists. I didn't bring them down. The truth did. I just made sure the truth was very, very well documented. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate karma and workplace justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this revenge story, please subscribe to the channel for more tales of truth triumphing over corporate manipulation. Share your own workplace experiences in the comments. Have you ever witnessed karma catching up with toxic bosses or dishonest colleagues? Let's discuss below.